University Circle, Inc., I'll get into a little bit of who we are and what we do. But one of the things that we've obviously been tracking here in University Circle in Cleveland, Ohio, is this real evolution of the conversation about anchor institutions and their roles in cities, advancing them as employment districts, as cultural districts, as workforce developers, as builders of infrastructure. And what we've noted in our district and elsewhere is that there's a lot of literature about an anchor institution in a singular way and its contribution to the places around it. But most of our anchor institutions now really are surrounded by other anchors, and hence we've brought forth in the literature and the conversation the notion of anchor districts, that there are more than a single university often. It's often several. Often there is, if there's a medical school associated, there's usually a teaching hospital that came about as a result. And city planners, to which that's my profession. I was the former city planning director of Cleveland, by way of introduction. Spent a term with Cleveland as planning director, and then have been out here the last 8 years at University Circle. My predecessors of a century ago had planned central business districts, and then they in many cities planned distinctly different education, medical, arts, and cultural districts. We found that in our research and work in cities that I'm going to talk about now, from Baltimore to Philadelphia to Boston to Pittsburgh to Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Atlanta, New Orleans, you name it. There's these education medical hubs that are sometimes a distinctly different geographic relationship than the central business district. Of all the cities I mentioned, those are cities that we have a relationship with now, and we have formed an organization called the Anchor District Council. We'll be meeting in Midtown Detroit this upcoming fall, and I can tell you more about that. But the reason we formed is I've been a part of for a long time the American Planning Association, certainly CEOs for Cities, the International Downtown Association, but there hasn't been a group that's necessarily specifically focused on anchor districts and their roles in cities. But what you're seeing in anchor districts is they're becoming fast-growing employment districts and commensurately more important these days than ever before because of their employment growth and their stick-to-itiveness and the fact that they stuck around their cities. And so we formed an organization of peers that do the work in between the anchors. We call ourselves community service corporations, and now I'll get into my presentation and talk a little bit about our story. So University Circle, we're just moving off the first page here if I can get my presentation moving. Momentarily, here we go. Let's look at the cities I referenced. I'm on page 2 now, and you can see population dynamics in cities in the eastern side of the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, and the southern side of the New England states. These are the cities that we, with our Anchor District Council, have been focused on. Obviously, it's just, for us, it's been proximity. We'd like to work in Seattle and Portland and places elsewhere, but for now, we've been focused in an area that, frankly, was within a geographic proximity to us in Cleveland, and we started working and learning what all these cities were doing. But what I'm showing on this first slide is obviously the population loss of our cities over the last 60 years. Just using Cleveland on the north side of Ohio there as an example, we've lost 60% of our population over a 60-year period. It's on par with Detroit's loss of population. It's pretty much the standard, although we've lost more than most of our cities, except for in the case of Columbus, there's been growth that has a lot to do with the way they've organized suburbs into their city by way of water rights. But everywhere else, you've seen losses. Akron at -27, Cincinnati at -41. Pittsburgh's lost half of its population over the last 50 years. Baltimore a third, Philadelphia a quarter, and so on. So what are we doing about it? The old model used to be, again, how the federal government impacted cities with old model cities programs and other programs in a model that was sort of federal, state, and municipally driven. Today, I'm not saying this is the only way, but another way to look at how we interrelate is on a whole geographically different level. How neighborhoods as centers of ideas, picking up a little bit on Bruce Katz's most recent work with Brookings on innovation districts, idea centers that these anchor districts represent, are churning all kinds of new ideas, new product related, in our case a lot of medical product related to what's in the heads of the docs and the researchers over at our anchor institutions, how we distribute those ideas through products and through a regional distributorship to a global marketplace. So thinking a little differently about how cities interact in more of a market dynamic these days, it's really about neighborhoods moving goods and services and ideas through a regional distributorship to a global marketplace. Obviously, as we're on a webinar today, technology helps quite a bit in that effort. Going back to U.S. Cities and the role and impact of anchors in their respective cities, look around the country, and of the largest 100 cities in the country, 2/3 of them have as their largest employer an anchor. And again, you look at Philadelphia, a traditional manufacturing town like Cleveland, but today UPenn being one of its largest employers. Baltimore, same. Johns Hopkins, largest employers. Cleveland, the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospital, 20 years ago weren't on the top 5 list of employers in Cleveland. In Cleveland, it was LTV Steel or National City Bank. Today, Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals are number 1 and 2, respectively, in Cleveland. In Detroit, sure, Ford Motor is still a big company in Detroit, but Henry Ford Hospital is the number 3 employer in the city of Detroit. So again, looking around our cities, our anchor institutions, those who stayed, have got a relatively larger impact today on their regional economy than ever before in the cities in which they are in. In the eds and meds marketplace, nationwide, 5% of all U.S. jobs have a tether to an eds and meds. But in cities, the important point is it's double the impact. Over 11% of all jobs in those cities come in the eds and meds market. And again, as we look at this, it's obviously proportionally even more relevant in cities as we talk about anchor institutions and their role, because if you were double-digit the employment sector here, the eds and meds really matter to the growth of those cities. So I'm going to pivot a little to the anchor district. I want to stress a lot of you are in the world of urban planning and urban development. I want to say a couple of things about anchor institutions. Yes, there's been a lot of work done. All of us know the great story of University of Pennsylvania and its work in West Philly, in which we often take plays right out of the playbook that Judith Roden left us. But the anchor institution in the singular sense is not the only game in town. How anchors cluster around one another and actually produce districts that produce benefit beyond a single institution is what I want to talk a lot about. I also want to talk about the fact that while the eds and meds have more or less been in the dominant domain space of what we commonly refer to as an anchor, reality is for planners, an anchor can be what you make of it. It can be a local community college. It can be a public market. It can be a community center for performing arts. It can be whatever anchors that community that is an organizing asset from which to organize around. And so we don't have the exclusive domain on what constitutes an anchor. Some of my colleagues and ours out in the field are looking at professional sports as anchors in the stadium and the job generation that happens with them. That's something you can further look into. Obviously, companies are anchors if they stay. I was just in East Cleveland, our neighboring community, this morning with GE Lighting that's been there since 1913, 750 employees on a campus in the poorest city in the state of Ohio, the city of East Cleveland. But GE Lighting, thanks for them, is still there as an anchor in the community. So it's not only the eds and meds, but a lot of my presentation does focus on eds and meds. So in anchor districts, what's going on? We all know, and Lee better than anybody in his opener, cities are coming back. To have a vibrant city center is obviously what everybody's been working toward in the downtown. But often in communities like Cleveland, there's many communities like us, it's not just about the central business district. Again, planners of their day develop the eds, the meds, the arts districts, sometimes distant from the center city core. In our case, there's a dual hub in Cleveland, a dual hub of a downtown central business district of about 100,000 employees and a hub of employment here in University Circle, 4.5 miles from the downtown, that's about 50,000 employees. We're the fastest growing square mile in the state of Ohio here in University Circle and the 4th largest employment center in the state of Ohio. So while we are the 2nd largest to our own downtown, we're an increasingly relevant district, the central business district, and out here, the anchor district. So vibrant center cities, strong anchor institutions, multi-anchored districts, these together sort of make up what we're talking about. And I'll get into how a community service corporation, which is what UCI is, actually serves them. This is our vibrant center city. I'm going to give you pictures of Cleveland for those who haven't been here or those who are going to come with CEOs for Cities in June. You'll see more of this on our tour with Lee June 19th. But this is a former surface parking lot. 5 years ago, none of this existed. This is our vibrant city center here in University Circle. It's called Uptown. It's been in the New York Times twice, in the real estate section of the New York Times. And the basic story is if on the eastern stretches of Cleveland in a forsaken parking lot, if they can build this, we can reclaim cities. And in the very, very background of this photo is the Seidman Cancer Center, which is University Hospital's multi-million-dollar new facility on the campus of University Hospital. In the near background is the Museum of Contemporary Art. In the foreground is the Uptown apartments that were built by the Marin family here in Cleveland in conjunction with our organization, UCI, who was the old land bank to this group, and Case Western Reserve University has helped bootstrap a lot of the investment. This is the scene on a Thursday night with students hanging around retail, living above that retail in between the spaces of the Museum of Contemporary Art and the Cleveland Institute of Art. Okay, so Cleveland's great civic idea, like many cities, was to build this anchor district. It was by design. 130 years ago, our forefathers and mothers decided that there should be a place for education in Cleveland. And from that came a place for teaching medicine at our teaching hospital, and later our arts and cultural community, which I'll get back into. But this is the eds, the meds, and the arts for Cleveland. When the New York Times wrote about University Circle first in 2006, and they talked about eds and meds, the Cleveland Renaissance story, I got a quick call from the Cleveland Museum of Art director who said, you forgot the kicker, the arts. It truly is the eds, meds, and the arts. So for us, it's a multi-anchored district, not of a single collegiate institution or not of a single hospital, but of a cluster, in our case, of 40 nonprofit institutions that make up the multi-anchored district. Michael Porter's work with the Institute for Competitive Inner Cities has worked on the interdependency with community. That's what we're all about. This is about really bridging town and gown. This is about eliminating the barriers to the communities around us. The paradox of place in our anchored district, like so many of the cities that I've referenced, is we are a relatively well-to-do and well-growing community in a sea of urban poverty. And I'll get back into that. But really what it means for us is how are we moving the needle in the neighborhoods around us and the partnerships that we have. So again, the quick scan of the cities we've been working with, from Worcester, Mass. to Boston, Massachusetts, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Cincinnati, Ohio, Columbus, and Cleveland and Detroit. You look around these photos, and again, who are the big area employers? In Columbus, it is the Ohio State University. I mentioned in Detroit, it is Henry Ford Motor Hospital. In Cleveland, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals. In Cincinnati, of course, there's still Procter & Gamble and many successful for-profit firms, but there's the University of Cincinnati in the Uptown District of Cincinnati. Again, in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins. In Philly, Penn and its affiliates. And we are working around these cities to sort of leverage the anchor factor. And in between those anchors are these community service corporations. This might be the part you're not as familiar with. If you're not, you ought to explore what Midtown Inc. is doing in the city of Detroit, UCI here in Cleveland, University Park in Akron. Actually, there's a story of a community service corporation there that's had its fits and starts, but we hope they'll be coming back. Campus Partners is an example in Columbus that actually has been ultimately more subsumed by the campus of Ohio State University itself. Uptown Cincinnati, more of a consortia like us, a 501c3 nonprofit working with area hospitals, universities, and arts and cultural institutions. In Baltimore, there was an intentionally developed East Baltimore Development group that is working in the Johns Hopkins space. Most people are familiar with Penn's University City District that has its own, again, 501c3 serving in the community. Up in Boston, we work with MASCO, which is Medical Arts Science Corporation of Boston in the Fenway neighborhood. You're mostly familiar with Fenway Park, but in that area of the Longwood area of Boston. And I put in Worcester, Mass., a smaller second city to Boston in Massachusetts, but doing similar work, investing in place with the strong anchor partner of Clark University there. So this is a group of the nonprofits working in between the institutional anchors. And what are we? A community service corporation, by definition. It's a term we came up with here at UCI. We trotted it out with some of our partners around that geography I was looking at. We really realized that we weren't just a CDC. Even though our city refers to us as such, that's fine. We're happy to be one part CDC. We are a community development corporation in the real estate development sense. I have a vice president of real estate and planning who essentially fills the role of the leader of our CDC. But we're also a special improvement district. In University Circle's case, we're having, thanks to the German Marshall Fund next week, a seminar about how SIDS come to be in anchor nonprofit districts where they're harder to get together because of the status of a nonprofit not paying property tax, but I can come back to that in a minute. But we've been running since 1959 specialized services through an assessment here in University Circle for the service of a police department. And has all the rights of pertinent a peace officer in the state of Ohio. We have a 30-member police department that is really the forerunner to the SIDS. SIDS got going in Toronto in the 60s. They hit the United States shortly thereafter, and they've been running ever since, and they've been populating multifold in cities across the country. But we've been running the SID here since about 1959 on a voluntary payment basis. We're also a chamber. Most of you, if you work in the neighborhood work, have merchants associations, bit of a chamber of commerce here. Ours is sort of nonprofit corporations and culture confluencing here in the circle. So we're one part CDC, one part SID, and one part chamber. It's a little bit of a pivot from just being a CDC, and I'm advising a lot of colleagues, think of yourself as more than just a development corp. If you're taking care of Main Street or you're working in association with your business partners on workforce development and other business-related services. How are we funded? We're non-governmental, non-public support. We are a new market tax credit allocatee. That's great, so that is federal funding, but most of our sources, the large majority of our sources, come not from any governmental funding. We are driven on a three-part business model of fee-for-service. So for that police department to run 24/7, 365 days a year, I get a fee from university hospitals. I get a fee from my smaller partners in the neighborhood. Everybody pays into that as a fee-for-service. We do get philanthropic and dollars that come off of our endowment, but the reality is, as we all know, it's harder and harder these days to raise funds through the nonprofit community and through foundation support. They've got a lot of stretches on their dollar, and so this is less and less for us a pillar in our business model. More and more it's fee-for-service. And the third, which is real estate. We have annuitized land under land lease relationships where with developers we've leased them the land under 50-year lease agreements, but we've taken out an annuity strategy where we can support our long-term sustainable future through the constant receipts of real estate. So for us, we have housing, we have commercial, we have parking, albeit less of that lately, and that's our business model. We are a development, a service, and an advocacy corporation. Under the development tranches, and I say this to you because it's important to talk about anchors, but it's also important to talk about the organizations serving them, the glue between the, hey, this wouldn't happen, picture to the left of the housing that was on a former surface parking lot that we owned, but for that development, service, and advocacy corporation working on the in-between spaces. So this is a little bit about the anchors and the organizations that support them. Under the development services, you can see and read for yourself what we do. We're a land banker, we're a developer. We do a lot in the physical planning and real estate work. On the service side, we have services ranging from community education to community police to the Clean Safe ambassadors like the photo you see there. That's Robert, who actually is up and down our Main Street Euclid Avenue with that vehicle keeping the sidewalks clean. We're a shared service center, essentially becoming a shared service organization, doing bulk purchasing from everything from waste management to insurance buys on a group basis with our partner institutions, which make us more of a chamber of commerce. Advocacy strategies, we do traditional marketing and communications. Our seasonal events are event-based marketing with a purpose to bring people here, to congregate together, to see what a great place this is, and that's what we do. I'll talk a little bit more about the neighborhood and regional partnerships. They're huge. As it relates to anchors, a lot of people are familiar with our partners who have really moved the needle. One I'll bring out specifically, university hospitals. As far as working with area neighborhoods, we work in an environment, as I mentioned, that is surrounded by poverty. And in that surround of poverty, we're trying to literally improve lives through very targeted ways. University Hospitals has a live, buy, and hire strategy. They built in their 2010 campus plan here in University Circle, 80% of the goods and services that went into building their hospital came from regional suppliers. Their hire is now intentionally hiring local residents in the immediate 6 neighborhoods of what we call Greater University Circle. And our living program is one that we sell for our institutions, nonprofits, who can, as employees of the nonprofits, be eligible for mortgage assistance up to $30,000 on the purchase of a home, forgivable after 5 years. If after that 5th year they've stayed in the home for 5 years, we forgive them of that loan, and it becomes free money for the equity of their house. We also give, through the Cleveland Foundation, a month's free rent in that pool of dollars if you're an employee here, and everybody knows this, again, a page out of UPenn's earlier work in the 90s. Let's get people to live local, and be a part of the local scene. So that's some of the advocacy work that goes on with University Circle and our partners. As I mentioned, the Cleveland Foundation, there's also workforce cooperatives going on that are exciting too, so I'll tell you more about that. But again, I gave you the sort of rundown of what we do. Quickly, the story of Cleveland, I'm going to just historically run through very quickly. We are a place that by design, again, this was an intentional 130-year effort to locate 2 universities in the neighborhood, Case Institute and the Western Reserve University. Shortly thereafter, we started to build the arts community. The circle bears its name as the place where the trolleys turned at the university. The lower photo on your webinar there is the Cleveland Museum of Art. Why that's at all interesting to this conversation about an anchor district is the first Museum of Art director decided that there should be other museums and cultural institutions around the Cleveland Museum of Art. So Frederick Whiting, the first director of the museum in 1916, called for what would be the future space of the Cleveland Orchestra and the Cleveland Botanical Gardens, the Natural History Museum, and the Historical Society. These were all intentionally built as a campus of anchors before they knew what the term anchor really meant. Here's a picture of Lakeside Hospital, which moved here on the upper photo to affiliate with the Medical School of Case Western. And this is John Severance below, digging ground right in the precipice of the Great Depression for what would be the concert hall bearing its name at Severance Hall, home to the Cleveland Orchestra. This is life on our great main street. Most of the cities we reference have a great main street, from Woodard to Forbes to any other great main street of any of the cities referenced. This was life on Euclid Avenue, a hustling, bustling, vibrant place. It had the highest concentration of millionaires on any major street in America in its day. It became a place that was forgotten with urban sprawl in the post-Second World War out-migration from the city. So what did we do? We put together a consortium of people who tried to stabilize early on with all the land banking strategies and vacant property work going on today. The best is to assure site control in the future. So we had a benefactor of the University Circle organizations named Elizabeth Ring Mather, who was talking with Robert Moses, her friend, on the good side of Moses. He had his good and bad side. On the good side said to Ring Mather, he said, you should bring together a development foundation that can buy land for the future growth of your anchors. That was the preceding group. That was us, the University Circle Development Foundation. Upper photo were the gentlemen that she brought together from what I call the Old Boys Network, I guess, the Old Boys Club here, the publisher of the press, the City Hall Chief of Staff, and my first predecessor. But she put them to work, and they put a good work plan together, and that was to build a foundation to develop a place that would be University Circle in the future. And here's the story of life around us. It was a place of urban out-migration, which also caused all kinds of strife in our neighborhoods. Pre and post Dr. King's assassination, you had, in our case of Cleveland, riots that were, front page news in Time magazine, the Huff riots and the Glenville riots of the 1960s. The same went on in Chicago, in Detroit, and Newark, and elsewhere. But for us, the great chapter turn was not to build that wall around our anchor district, as some urban serving universities decided to do. I won't name them, but you know who they are, with big walls and fortress citadel-like environments around their campuses. Instead, early on, we went into the neighborhoods with our institutions. We created experiential learning programs, intentionally went out to pre-K through 12 programs and exposed students to our institutions. And we built a bus system that's still in works today here at UCI. So we've been at it for 40 years, serving hundreds of thousands of students over the years, about 10,000 every year here in University Circle. So back to the great civic idea to build the eds, meds, and arts. Question is, what does it do for the neighborhoods around? In 2006, which began really, my tenure here in UCI started in 2005. With my team here, we realized that we had done one thing too much. We had over-institutionalized. It's a familiar concept to those of you from cities around the country where your anchor district is great, but how many more parking garages can the neighborhood absorb? We took out too much of that urban fabric. We needed to replace that. We needed to create a vibrant urban district all over again. So our work over the last 5 years has been shoring the core, the asset base of University Circle. Our next chapter is really what are we doing in neighborhoods around us. But I just want to take you on a quick ride up the health line. For those of you who are going to be at CEOs for cities in Cleveland in June, you may take this tour with us. But for those not, let me take a quick virtual tour for you. Euclid Avenue, again, was the place where the highest concentration of wealth in any major city was, and then it was a place that was forgotten. We sold off our trolleys to the city of Toronto. They went on to make a great transit community. We went down to Curitiba, Brazil, and we looked at this product, an articulated rapid transit vehicle. We call it the BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit. It works like rapid rail. It operates with 2 doors and signalized system. Most, not on this stretch, but most of the stretch is a centerboard median platform. Looks and feels like rail, but it's about 15 times cheaper than rail. Worked for us, and we got a federal New Starts grant from the Federal Transit Administration to pilot what was called the dual hub corridor in its day. That was downtown to uptown to the dual employment districts, from the central business district to the anchor district. Today it's called the Healthline. It's partially sponsored by our Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals. So what happened? On the main street, these are just quick pictures of life on the main street. Everybody opened their doors to the main street. They began to think that they were a part of Euclid all over again. So the main campuses of the museums and the hospitals began to meet the street again. Again, taking down literally fortress architecture that walled the anchors out from their community and began to embrace the street. I linger for just a second on a hotel site here because we couldn't have built this without the strength of the anchor next door, University Hospitals. But this courtyard is a 150-unit hotel that we built on a postage stamp property just off of Euclid, booked up every night because of the families here for medical care. We restored quality urban fabric, didn't knock it down, intentionally decided to renovate. This is actually partially HUD-based Section 8 housing next to some of the highest commanding rents in the city. It's an economically integrated neighborhood. University Circle's efforts are also to sort of create pocket parks and urban spaces along the Healthline that made for a quality amenity along the Healthline. Great cities like Boston know this, that the pocket parks are what give the city the special charm. We lured other institutions that were in back streets of Cleveland to the front main street, like the Museum of Contemporary Art. This is at the center of Uptown. And I mentioned Uptown, again, made the Times probably because it sat on a lifeless, it was previously a lifeless surface lot. Instead, today, we were in an urban food desert as qualified by the federal government. Today, we've solved the problem with a new urban grocery store on the Healthline. This, in the first phase, was 115 units of housing that ended up 25% of our occupants come from other places, other countries, that is, and 75% from outside of Cleveland. So it's a mecca for people coming for other points for research, for their education, and other. And so this is a rise, a fall, and a rise again of a great American street. As an example, the Cleveland Institute of Art decided that there should be a central home for the campus of their College of Art. This is an old Ford assembly plant that they renovated, and now they're into their second phase of the build-out. This was a lifeless lot that became the Center for the Hearing and Speech. This was a lifeless lot that became upscale urban housing across from the Museum of Contemporary Art. And I'm proud of this one. It's not for the architecture, it's for the fact that this is the first new in-town townhome apartments built at a market rate in the city of East Cleveland that borders us immediately, that was built in 60 years. There was no building of any market housing in 60 years. This obviously appeals to, in our case, a lower and moderate price point on the affordable side of rent. It's not publicly subsidized, it is market rate, but there's a lot of clerical workers, there's a lot of custodial workers, there's a lot of people working back offices and front desks at the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospitals. They're living in this housing, which essentially is sort of place-based housing, which we've incentivized again with a month's free rent if they'll live here in place and take the Healthline. All in, that Healthline experience, the BRT for Cleveland, is now attracting visitors from everywhere who are sucking wind trying to figure out how to get light rail built in their community. Instead, they're coming to see a BRT alternative that is cheaper, that is affordable, that is flexible, and that can be built. We built this in a 5-year swing, and the build-out caused for $6 billion in investment in the corridor. I've shown you 20 blocks that attracted $1.1 billion, but over 6 miles, $6 billion, a $200,000 federal New Star project leveraging $6 billion, so therefore a 30-to-1 private-to-public return on investment. In the corridor, because of a place-based strategy to shore the core of the anchor district, we've grown 1,000 jobs each year since 2005. We continue to grow that, and as a square mile, it's a pretty robust square mile in Ohio. It's $14 billion in economic yield, representing 5.5% of our county jobs and 12% when you count back in all the professional services jobs related. So again, remember, that's 5.5% of all U.S. jobs, but 11% in city ratio. Speaking of 11%, University Circle grew 11% in population in the last decennial census. Again, remember the very first slide I showed you. We're not happy about our population decline as a city. 60% of our population lost in a 60-year period. A city that was once twice the size it is today, We lost 17% in the last decennial census. I think that factor is finally stabilizing. Cleveland's next census, I believe, will show a more stable population. That said, there was a growth pocket. It's out here in University Circle where we grew 11%. Why? Let's talk about strategies to attract immigrants. We've done that in University Circle. We have a partner in Global Cleveland. We have partners in all of our anchors. Case Western Reserve's top draws outside of Cleveland come from Shanghai and Beijing. They're number 2 and 3 cities to draw from outside of Cleveland. And that has made for us a double-digit foreign-born population here, which represents a healthy city. Why, if Philadelphia grows again, is it growing? Why is New York always growing? It's because of immigrants. Cleveland itself is about 4.5% immigrant first foreign-born base. We are double that, and that's why we're growing against the grain of population loss. Quickly on the what's next, as you see this, it's a vision for density. It's a vision for a transit-oriented community. It's a place that is respecting the walker first, the car second. Actually, the car probably third, transit second. It's a place that has taken empty lots, and this is on the grow as we speak, and built new high-density townhomes. It's a place that centralized campuses of a College of Art. It's a place that we just are at the precipice of breaking ground on this 200-unit new development. In the background there is an 8-story office tower. And the upper right here is a transit center, a true transit-oriented development. When I talk transit-oriented development, there are sites that are transit-oriented development, and there are corridors. The Euclid Corridor was a 5-mile lineal transit corridor development. But you can see density. And speaking of, these are 4 pictures from places elsewhere, but they're typical of what's about to be built here. With the same developer that developed these products in other cities, we have now an agreement underway for a 27-story high-rise here in University Circle. People have differences of opinion about density and verticality. All I'll say is it's what supports transit. And we know by our facts that to get bus, you need at least 5 units per acre. To get rail, you need at least 10 units per acre. But to really get a robust transit picture, you need a lot more than that. Uptown, which I showed you earlier, is about 30 units per acre. This is over 150 units per acre, 280 units planned on the central Euclid Corridor. So that supports this. 2 new Tiger Grant investments that were supported by the FTA. I think, again, the operative is, do you have the density to justify this? And we say back to the federal government, we do. So finally, in the aggregate, what have we been building toward? We've been simply trying to put back a neighborhood that was partially taken out through the anchors, and here it is, a true picture of life in University Circle. Kristen and her son at our neighborhood grocery store, no longer in a food desert, but in a place that they can fully access every goods in the grocery store within a walk of her home 3 blocks from their store. A place to play, you know, again, programs, public spaces, places to muse, places to learn, to stroll, to shop. The operative here is anything you need, you can access. All new places, all new experiences in the complete neighborhood, which has been our objective, to build what we call the 20-minute neighborhood. The 20-minute neighborhood meaning you can get everything you need, from quality schools to quality health care to quality groceries to quality experiences within a 20-minute walk or a transit ride here in University Circle. That's been the operative to build the complete neighborhood. And that's where I end. I started with the anchor district and the great civic idea to build it. I then got into what a community service corporation can do to complement it by building toward a complete neighborhood off of the notion that when you densify, you can build transit. And it has only happened because of the anchors, because of the employment base that has created for us a housing market that has then created for the housing market a retail market. But I also want to say a couple things before I close out and take questions. The anchor strategies are just getting going here in University Circle. Sure, we have individual anchor institutions that are so important, from the Cleveland Clinic to University Hospitals to Case Western Reserve University. But we are 40 nonprofits, all collaboratively working. All 40 of our nonprofits are eligible, thanks to foundation support, for the mortgage assistance. We are all now, and are organizing next week with German Marshall Fund to talk about what we can do more of in the neighborhoods around us. So when University Hospitals, an anchor institution and a leader in our marketplace, leads with a live, a work, and a hire philosophy, it begins to create, through a leadership training model, everybody's on board. Other institutions are doing the same. I didn't talk enough about the contributions of the Cleveland Foundation, but they've been large. The Cleveland Foundation has worked, and some of you have heard about the Evergreen Cooperatives in the neighborhoods. They're still in a new start mode, admittedly. Some things are working and some things they're still figuring out. But the reality is that they learned a while ago many things, including the fact that there's a lot of linens that get washed every night out of the hospital rooms of the hospitals. What if locally we clean the linens in the neighborhoods? Well, a worker co-op was started just down the street from the clinic in UH to create that workforce co-op. And it's today brought forth the qualified hard to employ, i.e. ex-offenders and others, to work in a worker co-op that's building wealth in their neighborhoods and within their families. Another is the Green City Growers program. We learned, obviously, that we eat a lot of lettuce in the hospital cafeterias, our patients and our visitors. Why not grow it here locally? So in the central neighborhood, one of the hardest hit neighborhoods adjacent to the Greater University Circle, there is now a multi-head lettuce. When I say multi, hundreds of thousands of heads of lettuce coming out monthly and going right into the clinic cafeterias. We've done the same with solar retrofits. With all the flat top roofs, why not catch the sun and why not teach people how to actually produce solar rooftops? So we're doing that. We're getting into lighting systems, into news and communication systems that all come from the benefit of the anchor. So what started as an idea 150 years ago to create, before they even knew the term, an anchor district, leveraged a growing economy over the years. It is today the fastest growing economy in Ohio. But really where the rubber meets the road is whether you can make a complete neighborhood of it and whether you can leverage your work in that neighborhood to benefit some of the neighborhoods that have experienced abject poverty over the years. I'll close out there to say that I think we're just getting going with anchor district development strategy with so much work and attention appropriately paid over the years to Central Business District and adjacent neighborhoods. This is really about the next frontier of anchor districts revitalizing cities. Thank you very much.
Chris, that was a terrific presentation. You just talked about the complete neighborhood. That was the complete presentation. And you did 40 minutes of content and a 20-minute presentation. So I just want you, and by the way, for those of you who don't know Chris, that was Chris talking slow.
That's right.
Now, for those of you who still want to ask questions, just go on your screen, type in on the chat, and type your question. But we already have a few questions. I wanted to mention that we have more than 25 cities represented on this call, and I'm going to ask Katie Fishman on the CEOs for Cities team to read the questions out loud to Chris, and Chris will respond. So Katie, go ahead.
Okay, Chris, the first question comes from Matt Weinstein, who says, did you need to create new state-level policy tools in Ohio to facilitate the redevelopment of University Circle?
Good question, Matt. In some cases, yes, we did need state-enabling legislation to allow for our police department. Because they have all the rights, again, pertinent to any police officer in the state, we did need special state legislation that made us a qualified entity. We were the first of our kind in the state of Ohio as a community police department formed in 1959. As far as other legislation goes, we've not had to need much of it, although we are wondering if to create a SID that doesn't have to create a whole new board for us. If we create a formal SID, we may need some enabling legislation in the state to create that SID. As far as everything else goes, it's really just been seeking state support, and I should credit my friend and colleague here, Lee Fisher, the former Lieutenant Governor of Ohio and Attorney General. I mean, we've had in administration, he worked in great support to help get projects going like the Opportunity Corridor, which is going to connect a regional marketplace to University Circle. So it's mostly been, beyond a little bit of enabling legislation for police and maintenance services, it's mostly been the need for, infrastructure support. But I will say also we do need companion city legislation. A lot of the area we talk about as Community Service Corporation, we are maintaining the public realm that is otherwise maintained by the city itself. So we have mutual aid agreements with the city for our police, and we have mutual jurisdiction for the public realm. We also land lease from the city a lot of the parkland that we then maintain and program. I sometimes get into debates about whether we are kind of creating a city that is void of, quote, public service or is, taking a job in the public service away from somebody. I think we've found in our city that it's just complementary, that there's enough work to go around and there's enough labor. There's never enough labor to do the job, and that's why the creation of the Community Service Corporation has happened, to help backstop the city in its efforts to create a quality community.
Okay. Our next question comes in and says, do you and your other Ohio partners in Cincinnati, Akron, etc., work together on state-level policy and advocacy, for anchor districts?
We do. It's a great question. And again, back to the legislature, the one thing that they took note of, and there was a lot of debate, and I didn't necessarily support their position on this personally, but there was some cuts in funding of muni budgets from the local government fund here in Ohio. Well, no surprise, the state legislators took some interest in what we do because we don't cost anything on the tax base. We find through our business model of real estate, philanthropy, and fees for service another way to do public service. So there was a lot of interest in what we do, but I always carefully say it's not to supplant, it's to complement. But on advocacy, to your point with our Anchor District Council, yes, that's one of the reasons we formed. We formed this group of peers to create learning experiences from one another and what each other is doing in each of their respective cities. We also did it to create sort of a learner's toolkit of what are the tools used by each group to get done what they get done. But thirdly, it was about advocacy. We took a very strong stance together with the U.S. Congress on the renewal of the New Markets tax credits because we all use New Markets tax credits in our respective districts. We've taken some strong stances on transit support and Tiger Grant funding and things of that nature. So we have developed a bit of a lobbying arm, and we should. It's not a formal lobbying, but we coalesce and talk to one another to make sure that we're in front of our respective representatives when big legislative needs come our way.
All right, our next question comes in and reads, a community development corporation is dependent upon land banking and developing the land based on commonly held goals. How do you go about land banking when most land belongs to a few property owners who control the use of the property?
Well, I definitely agree, and I think our partner developers would agree that site control is king. And we have been a land bank since our formation in '57. That was the very first thing we were formed to do. The second thing we were formed to do was the police department. The third thing along the way, as I said, was the education department. And today we're a full-service community service corporation with community planning and real estate, community services, community police, community education, and so on. But the land bank has been the key to our success. 60% of, again, the university and hospitals built on the land we bought. It's tricky because it depends on the marketplace. We bought early. This has been a 50-year work in progress, so it's not something we turned out overnight. But reality, as was said, we've sort of developed most on the land that we've banked. We are now going into our second concentric ring in areas around the Opportunity Corridor and our adjacent neighborhoods to once again land bank. It's not land banking to gentrify. It's not land banking for profit. We're a nonprofit. It's land banking for community development. But it depends on the nuance of the marketplace you're in. You're right. Around most of these anchor districts, it's difficult because there's not vast tracts of cheap land. Conversely, there's not much land and it's mostly expensive. But I think what we're finding in most of these anchor districts, the name of the game is what lies around you. And the Russian doll, sure, you're accomplishing the growth of the first doll in the Russian doll, but what about the next three? And that's where our land bank strategies are going.
Chris, as usual, you've done a phenomenal job. Even though we had a few more questions, I'm going to respect everybody's time and wrap it up. I'm going to ask Chris if you could identify how people can contact you in the coming days and weeks if they have further questions.
Sure thing. Thanks, Lee. Our website is universitycircle.org. You can always post a comment there or find me there. And my personal email is CRONAYNE@universitycircle.org. I'll repeat that one more time, CRONAYNE@universitycircle, all one word, .org. And Mark, Katie, Lee, anybody else can help you get to me. And we hope to collaborate with you more.
Chris, I spoke too soon. There is one more question, and I don't want to cut them off. It says, it was great to see arts and culture mentioned, but are the arts really at the table when it comes to planning? And are they involved, have you involved them with creative placemaking to sow the seeds of arts and an arts ecosystem?
I'm really glad we got that chance to address that last question. I want to mention our board is a board made up of all of our nonprofit institutions, from the smallest free medical clinic of Cleveland to the Cleveland Music School settlement to the largest Cleveland orchestra and the university hospitals. It makes my board a large board, but we intentionally built it with everybody having a seat at the table. So all arts organizations that are nonprofits in our district are represented at the board level. Interestingly, in 2007, we changed our governance structure away from what you might note as a normal SID model of largesse creates largesse in votes, kind of the, you'll appreciate the congressional House model, to more of a Senate model, where Texas and Rhode Island have the same vote. And in the Senate model, you know, we have the largest community, Cleveland Museum of Art, with the smallest artist archives with the same vote at the table. I think it's critical that they all be at the table. And in our case, we've gone to one institution, one vote model. But also in terms of their program contributions, our education program would not exist without our arts institutions. They created the first neighborhood collaborative, and then the hospitals and universities followed suit. It's really, we wouldn't exist as a cultural district and a destination without our arts. So they participate in everything the eds and meds do. The housing strategies, the workforce strategies, the education lifelong learning program. They are a payer into our police and a benefit of our police and our transit and our shuttle services. So yes, the arts are at the table. They're funding programs and they're funded by programs.
Everybody, thank you for taking the time today. I just want to also remind you that if you're interested in learning more about CEOs for Cities, go to our website, ceosforcities.org, and you can find more information about our June 18th to the 20th workshop in Cleveland, at which Chris Ronayne will be giving not just a talk, but an actual tour of what you just heard about. Also, you can learn more about our national meeting in Nashville from November 4th to the 6th, or you can just learn more about what CEOs for Cities does and how you might be able to join. Thanks for everybody tuning in. You can go to our website and get more information on this presentation, hopefully in the next few days. I know some of you asked if you can do that, and we'll work something out with Chris so that you can get access to the presentation either through Chris or through us. We'll figure that out.